and to Mr. Watanabe, who I've had so many years of experience with, and I really appreciate his willingness to put up with me. You know, he gave me a promotion last year to senior vice president, and I asked him, well, what does that mean? And he says, you're getting older. So I appreciate him. And I appreciate Mark Baker. It was a loss for me personally to have Mark Baker come over here because he was doing so much over there. But his willingness and his commitment to be here to help start this vehicle in Europe is just magnificent. So he's the one that invited me, and I appreciate his staff for not vetoing the selection. I think that was pretty good of them. Some of you know I've had many years' experience in this industry, about 30 years now. And I've learned some things. I've made a lot of mistakes. Somebody told me once, he said, Proffit, at least you're a good bad example because of some of the mistakes that I've made. And I think I've learned from a lot of them. Most of you are familiar with the expression in our industry, and our whole compensation plan is designed around this. The way to get what you want is what? Help other people get what they want. Now, that's a beautiful phrase, but there's two real problems with the phrase. And I want to talk about that for a few minutes because I know some of you are just beginning in this marvelous industry. It assumes two things. First of all, you know what you want. And the second one is that other people know what they want. And those are both false assumptions. Most people don't know what they really want. And so for us to assume that they do is a real problem. Now, I think it's really important that we understand why don't we know what we want? And I've seen this happen so many times with people that because of life's experiences, maybe even how they were raised, they become conditioned. They become conditioned to think that they're not smart, that they don't have enough skill, that they don't have enough talent. They're too young, they're too old, they're too small, they're too big. Don't cross the street, you'll hurt yourself. All kinds of conditioning that happens to us. And that's a real tragedy, because what it means is most people have given up on their dreams. They really don't have any dreams. And the assumption that we make a lot of times is that people know that there's all kinds of potential for them. And yet in reality, they really have given up. I think part of it is because of our culture. It's really an interesting, fascinating to me what happens to us as human beings. We can learn so much from animals. Some of you have heard the experience of, in Arkansas in the United States, they have a lot of wild pigs, boars, and they have hunting season and so forth on them. But there was one particular group of pigs back there that were really causing some problems for the farmers there, destroying crops and so forth. And so they hired a world-famous trapper, animal trapper, to come in and trap the pigs. And he guaranteed them that he'd be able to trap those pigs without killing any of them. And what he did, it was really interesting, because this is another one of those lessons we can learn about life. What he did is he began over a period of months to set up a fence in a big clearing there in Arkansas. And one by one he'd put in a post, and every day he'd put in another post. Every night, however, he would put corn in the middle of the clearing. And he noticed by the footprints coming in that the pigs would come in at night and eat the corn. In the morning, of course, they were gone. So day by day he was adding to the fence. And then one day he started putting little barriers across parts of the fence. Every night the pigs would continue to come in. And finally, one day, there was only one opening left in the fence. And the pigs all came in to eat the food that night, and he closed that last gate. And in the morning, there were the pigs. And they were amazed that this had been able to be accomplished with so little work on his part. And here was his comment. He says, I can trap any animal alive as long as I can get it to depend on me for food. Now, I've thought about that story a lot, of what happens to us as human beings, particularly in a culture who wants to take care of us. We can get the government to take care of us. We can get companies to take care of us. And what it does is we end up getting trapped. We end up getting trapped because we depend on them. You've heard what happens in most companies. Most companies pay their employees just enough to keep them from quitting. The employees work hard enough just to keep from getting fired. And with that beautiful relationship, they go through life. Well, it's a sad commentary, but the real sadness about it is most of us have been trapped. And what I mean by that is we've been conditioned into believing that we can only do so much, that we really can't make a difference, that we really can't do more with our lives, that we don't have the skills necessary to go out and get. In fact, what really happens is we're afraid. We become so trapped with these handouts that we get, these piddly little crumbs off this banquet table of life, that we build a fear that, well, it's better to have those crumbs than nothing at all. One of the best examples that I ever saw was an example in a seminar that my wife and I attended. And they gave the example to her. They gave her some peanuts, and she was to imagine that these were rotten peanuts. They were terrible, the things she didn't want to have in life. And then they held out a filet mignon steak, beef steak, much more desirable than the rotten peanuts. But in order for her to reach out and grab the steak, what'd she have to do? She had to let go of the peanuts. And it was so difficult for her to do that, because what would happen if she let go of the peanuts and reached for the steak, and what might happen? They might take it away, right? And there are so many of us who would rather have the rotten peanuts than reach out for the beautiful things that life has to offer. Some of you may have heard this story, and to me it really personifies this whole idea of fear. Years and years ago in Persia, one of the Persian generals had just sentenced one of the traders there to death. And it was his custom, before the sentence was executed, he would bring in the prisoner and have an interview with him. And this prisoner came in for his interview, and here's what he said: you have the choice between being executed by the firing squad, or you can go through the black door. Now think about it. What in the world could be behind the black door that could be worse than death? I mean, all the horrors and torture and all these kind of things. And the prisoner thought for a moment, the black door or the firing squad. And he chose the firing squad. And so he went out into the courtyard where, in a few moments, the general heard the shots ring out as the prisoner was executed. And his lieutenant was there, and he says, "Why? What is behind the black door?" And the general said, "Freedom. And I've never found anyone yet who has the courage to choose the black door." Now, I like that story for a couple of reasons. Yeah. How many of us are afraid to go through that marvelous door, so-called black door? See, what makes it so fearful is what? We don't know what's behind the black door. We don't know what trials and problems there might be behind the black door. But because of the fear, we don't experience freedom. Now, this is, and I bring this up because this is what all of you either have experienced or will experience as you introduce this program, this marvelous freedom opportunity to folks in Europe. The fear of the unknown. Network marketing is basically new. I know that magnetics, many of them have never even heard of. And so there's a lot of fears, just as happened in North America, and I'm sure it happened in Japan as well. And as people get ready to take that step, many times their fears will overcome them. You all know the definition of fear. If you take the letters F-E-A-R, it's false evidence appearing real. And that's the scary thing to many of us. We imagine the worst case. We imagine what might happen if, rather than taking the other point of view and sensing what might happen for us. Now, this is the big challenge, as I see it, for you folks, and especially for your friends and neighbors and relatives as you begin to build your business. Being willing to find people who, even though they may not know what they want, are at least willing to take one step and another step and another step. And as you build and as you work with them, they will increase in their dreams and their vision about what this can be for them. Now, one of the things that really happened for me, some of you may have heard my story. I was raised on a ranch in Wyoming. By the way, I met an old friend of mine at the party last night. You see that big dinosaur there at the party? He's from Wyoming. I was amazed. That was a cousin of mine way back then. But that little town in Wyoming, I was raised on a ranch. My father a rancher, my mother a school teacher. And my folks taught me early on that I needed to study hard so that I could get a good education, and that would allow me to go to college so that I could get a good, secure, what? Job. Well, I did. To me, that's what life was about. And some of you know the story. I went down to Wyoming and got in the shortest line, became an engineer, only to discover that engineering really wasn't what I enjoyed doing. But the problem was I was content with being average. This is what, I would do what everybody else did so that I could provide for my family. Average. You all know what average is, right? It's the best of the worst and the worst of the best. And average is the enemy of good. If we're content, and a lot of people are content with being average. Well, I'm not doing as I could do, but I'm not doing as bad as I might do. And so they're content with being average. And the scary thing about this, I don't know how many of you have experienced this with friends and relatives, this expression that says, most people go to their graves with their songs, their music, still in them. Because of fear of what people might say, because fear of sticking their neck out, because of fear of the unknown, the black door, they die without having realized the potential that they have. I love the Nikken slogan, humans being more. I love Mr. Masuda's philosophy of total fulfillment, total joy, total peace of mind in life if we become balanced in those 5 pillars of health. By the way, those of you who have not been to Silver Training, I sure hope you'll take advantage of that. We have the registration desk outside. It's Monday and Tuesday. You got a real opportunity to take advantage of that Silver Training. What it's designed to do is to help people discover, to rekindle, if you will, what it is they really want to have happen in their life. What might be the obstacles that are in the way, and then a strategy on how to get with it. Friday, I had an opportunity to do a little sightseeing here in London. Now, I've never been to London. And so I look at a map, but I'm not familiar with London, and I don't like the map of London, so I decide I'll use the map of Los Angeles to get around in London. I know where things are in Los Angeles, see, so why not use it in London? Doesn't work, does it? There's a real important metaphor for me in that point of view. See, the familiar, the map of Los Angeles, will not work in the unfamiliar territory of London. Here's my metaphor with that. Most of us are using maps in territory in our life that don't work anymore. I love the expression, good old Zeke. They asked him to come to a seminar sometime, and as he's getting on in years, his comment was this. He says, it ain't what I didn't know that was my undoing. It was what I knowed that wasn't true that caused me the problems. How many of us are using maps in our life that don't work, that don't provide what we want in our lives? Now, this to me is what's exciting. This is what I've learned in some 30 years now in this industry. This beautiful vehicle called Nikken is a way of looking at a map, a way of getting a new map, if you will, that will allow us to look at the familiar territory with a new light. Maybe a little bit more aliveness or vividness and vigor in our whole energy system. What I learned was an important expression. I had gotten involved, by the way, in network marketing, as I mentioned, a little over 30 years ago, because my engineering salary at General Electric wasn't providing enough income for me. And so I needed an extra, well, I needed an extra couple $100, $200 a month would do it, I thought. And I got involved in this little networking opportunity, started earning more money part-time than I was earning full-time at my job at General Electric. And then quit my job after about 18 months and went full-time in the network marketing industry. And I sold more than anybody else in that company. I sold my furniture, I sold my car, I sold my house. I was going down the tubes real fast because I thought that I knew it all. I thought that I had all the information I needed, and I didn't. And then somebody suggested to me that I start listening to cassette tapes. Some of you familiar? Well, that's a lie. It was not cassette tapes. Back then, we had records. There weren't even cassette tapes. That shows you how old I am, right? So I was listening to these records by an outstanding, in fact, he was considered the dean of the personal motivators. His name, Earl Nightingale. And he had a series called Lead the Field that just totally changed my life. And one of those recordings had this statement on it. And if you write anything down today, this might be something that will make sense to you. It says this: no life gets anywhere. No life gets anywhere unless it's focused, dedicated, and disciplined. Well, first of all, I wasn't focused. I didn't know even how to set goals. Nobody had ever taught me how to set goals, except to get up in the morning and go to bed at night. That was about it. Maybe eat at 3 meals a day. In fact, they had to be meat, potatoes, and gravy in those days for me, or it wasn't a real meal. And that was about the extent of my goals. The second part of that, being dedicated, I didn't even really know what that meant. And especially the discipline. The discipline was not me. And so this was a new concept for me. But it totally changed my life as I became aware of what I needed to do to be successful in that industry. Now, the focused part of it was well, it became the idea of having a clear picture of what I wanted in my life, a dream, if you will. And my problem was I only had little bit-sized goals. Like, you know, they did a survey, and I'll bet it would happen here in London as well. If the average Londoner was given £1 million, you know, just imagination, they were given £1 million to spend any way they want. Do you know what the survey in America showed? And I'll bet it would be the same here. People said this: well, I would fix the front porch. I would repair the automobile. I'd buy a new refrigerator. With £1 million, that's what they would do? What could they do with £1 million? See, most people, it's a foreign idea. Having that kind of freedom, having that kind of choices, people can't even fathom it. And so the challenge for us is to be able to have a bigger picture. And in my case, it was to dream a little bigger, to have bigger goals, to really know that I could make a difference, that my family could experience more freedom, that we could have some of the bounties of life and some of this abundance that was available. Now, one of the challenges with that is to get it really clear. For example, if you want a new automobile, that's not a very clear goal. You've got to name the model, the color, the year, when you want that to happen. This became such an important learning process for me. In fact, what I discovered was it wasn't just to have the goal that was important. It was to have the right attitude about achieving that goal. I brought a little couple of expressions that I'd like to share with you. In fact, Sir Walter Scott made the statement. He says, it's the attitude at the beginning of a task more than any other thing that will determine the success or failure of that task. I think it's the attitude towards the goal. And William Shakespeare, I think this was really exciting for me because talk about being at the right place at the right time with the right vehicle. His comment was, there's a tide in the affairs of mankind that when taken at the crest leads to fame and fortune. I think that's so significant of where you are right now. What is available, what is happening for you. There's a time, and this is the perfect time. It's when the surf's up in California. The surf is up, the water's fine, jump in and take advantage of it. One other expression that to me was important. Some of you may have heard this story about the tiger a few years ago, the little cub tiger who was raised with goats. Have you heard that story? Well, would you like to hear that story? Those of you who have heard me talk before, this is number 42. Okay? I tell my stories by the numbers, that way you can save time. See? This little tiger was raised with the goats, and in fact, he learned to even eat grass with the little goats. He even learned to bleat in an odd sort of sound, a way of bleating like the goats bad, you know. And one day the goats were grazing in the clearing, and into the outside of the clearing there came a tiger, and he roared the tiger's roar, and the goats took off running. Now the little tiger, something awakened inside of him when he heard that roar of his species. Something came alive, and he was excited about it, but at the same time he remembered that he'd been raised as a goat. And so at the moment when he was thinking to stay, he became fearful, and he ran off with the goats too. Now he could have stayed. He could have joined that other part of his species. Well, the moral of the story is this: there is nothing wrong with being a goat if you're a goat. What's wrong is being a goat when in reality you're a tiger. I love the story for a couple of reasons. Folks, there's you're the tigers. You're the tigers who now have that roar that you can go out and awaken your species. Awaken inside them that feeling of being more and being who they are. Understand, though, that they'll have a lot of fears. Some of you are familiar with one of the American presidents, the name of Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt recognized this fear that a lot of us have at the moment of greatness. And he made this statement that at a point in my life it had really important significance because of the fears that I was experiencing and how others attack you. You know, they've done that old expression, if there's a board full of nails and there's one nail that's sticking up, and you give a person a hammer, what's the first nail he's going to hit? The one that's sticking up? So when you stick your head up above the crowd, understand that others are going to want to hammer it down. And here's what Teddy Roosevelt said: far better it is to dare mighty things with glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows no victory nor defeat. Wise person. And Teddy Roosevelt was one of those who took risks. He was one of those who wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed. Now there's another part of this that comes in, because what I discovered in setting goals is there's a whole lot of challenges with how this comes about, because what we discover sooner or later is that the only way that we can achieve those ultimate goals, and I think I can probably name what you'd probably like to have most in your life, all of the trappings of the homes, the cars, the money, are simply ways that will allow you to experience freedom, that will allow you to experience happiness and joy, that will allow you to experience the glorious triumphs. It's really interesting. One person put it this way: you know, the person who has reached the top of the mountain didn't fall there. He had to make the climb. And in fact, those of you who have climbed mountains, why not just rent a helicopter to take you up to the top? What's the joy that you get in climbing mountains? And in fact, when you reach the hardest mountain to climb, do you think there's a little bit more joy in reaching the top of that mountain than climbing the easy one that everybody could walk up? I lived in Japan for 6 years, and one of the experiences that I had, I climbed Mount Fuji. They have an expression in Japan says you're a fool if you don't climb Mount Fuji, but you're even a greater fool if you climb it twice. And we climbed, it was in the middle of July, and it was one of those beautiful hot summer days in Tokyo when we set out to climb Mount Fuji. I, for some reason, thought that it would be hot on the top of the mountain. But we climbed during the night so that we could watch the sunrise, and I almost froze to death that night. Oh, it was so cold at 10,000 feet. I learned another one of those experiences. Get some experience. Mentoring. Y'all know what mentoring is? Get some input from some people who have done it, and let them, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's people who have done it already, and you can follow their advice and their experiences. But here's what I experienced. In this process of setting goals, this becoming focused on what we wanted, I discovered that there's really 3 goals, 3 things that motivate people. And I think if you can get a clear sense of these 3 things, when you're helping people get what they want, you can find out where they are. And in my mind, they're even at a maturity hierarchy, if you will. The first motivator, and Sterling Sill, who is a famous salesman in America for New York Life, shared this with me 25 years ago, and it's had significance in my life. He says, the first thing that motivates people is money. Money. And then he goes on to say that contrary, now think about your conditioning. When you first heard the words about, like Mark shared with our top distributor in America who earned over $250,000 in 1 month, what came up for you? Was it freedom? Or was it, oh no, money is the root of all evil? You know, that kind of an expression. What is our attitude about money? And Sterling Sill made the comment, he says, money is neither good nor evil. It's simply a tool that successful people use to build things. He says money is only as good as the hospital bills it'll pay, the vacations it'll provide, the freedom that will allow your family to have. Money is a tool. Now, I'm really excited about what's happening with the Nikken distributors. We have a person, maybe she's in the audience already, maybe she'll be here a little later, a lady by the name of Donna Shipwash out of Houston, Texas, who her passion is somehow to help little children who are bound to wheelchairs. Is that how they say that in England? Are they wheelchairs? I learned that there's a lot of different words for things, that I've made some serious blunders in trying to think that I spoke English. It wasn't English. But wheelchairs for children, she has these marvelous designs on them. They're colorful, they have cartoon characters, and they're a fun instrument. But her passion is to somehow get all the children in the United States who are in wheelchairs onto these beautiful new wheelchairs. Does that take money? She's placed thousands of these because she's been able to use her Nikken money to provide wheelchairs for people. How important is money in being able for her to realize those goals? I have another diamond distributor. They may be in the audience also, and I hope I don't violate a confidence here. Claudia and Chuck Branham, diamond distributors who four years ago virtually had very, very, very little. They have a son, mature son, around 38 or 40 years old, who has a debilitating illness, a genetic ailment that won't allow him to work in the ordinary world. What they're able to do with their money is provide a dignified source of income and work for a son, for a man who would not have had the opportunity otherwise, rather than just being on welfare of the state. I think that's, how important is money? Money is only as important as how you choose to use it. I think that's really significant. We have another, Leon Bates, who now is over in Russia selling Bibles, and he's using his Nikken money to provide him the money that he needs to provide his missionary efforts for whatever that is. I think these are exciting ways that people can start to understand what it is that they can do. Now, the second thing, by the way, that this Sterling Sill says that motivates people and I think you can see where they start to mesh, is people. People are motivators. In fact, it's interesting how sometimes negative people can be a positive motivator. When I went in to tell my boss at General Electric that I was going to quit and go full-time in my little network marketing business, he spent about a half hour trying to talk me out of it. That was kind of exciting. I'm glad he didn't say good riddance. But in the process, he made this statement. He said, well, go ahead and do it, Larry. And when it doesn't work out, come on back and we'll give you your old job back. Oh, that was the best thing he could have said to me. It's like the mother-in-law who says to her son-in-law, you're a no-good bum and you'll always be a bum. And what does he do? He goes out to become a millionaire to prove that she was wrong about him. Well, that's what happened for me. I could never have gone back. I had to make it. It was the negative comment that motivated me very positively. And another story that I've told for years that I just really love, some of you may have heard the story of Johnny Lingo. Johnny Lingo was a young bachelor in one of the South Sea Islands. Had some unusual customs there. And when it came time for the young bachelor to marry, what he did is he went and declared to the father of his bride-to-be that his intentions to marry her, even if he had never met her. So the day comes for him to declare who he's going to marry. Now, all the villagers are wondering which of the beautiful maidens in the village is Johnny going to choose. He's the most eligible. He's rich. He has all these things. He's the most eligible bachelor in the islands. And he comes into the village and he says, I'm ready to marry and I want to marry Mahala. Now they were really, they were amazed. Why would he choose ugly Mahala? Why would he choose this backward little girl that nobody had ever hardly even seen and shy and all this kind of thing? And then they started thinking, oh, now we know Johnny's a very good businessman too. See, what happened in that village, when they chose to marry somebody, they would offer the father so many cows as payment for their bride. 3 cows, 4 cows, 5 cows. And so the villagers are saying, oh, now we know why Johnny chose Mahala. Because maybe he can get by with 1 cow or maybe just a few pigs. He might not even have to give her father a cow. Now, the day came for the negotiation. And Johnny sits down with the father and the uncle, who's going to be the negotiator here. And he says, I want to marry Mahala, and I will pay 8 cows. Now the villagers know that he's crazy. He could have got by with 1 cow, and he's paying 8 cows, and so now Johnny loses all respect in the village. And he takes his beautiful bride, Mahala, but before he leaves, he'd ordered a beautiful looking glass, a mirror, from the little trading post. And he goes, and it's going to come from the States, and back in those days it had to come by ship, and so it's going to be about 6 months before the mirror arrives. The mirror arrived, and the owner of the trading post, who was a good friend of Johnny's, decided what he would do is he would take a boat, and he would go to Johnny's island, and he would take himself this beautiful mirror. And as he arrives, he walks into the little village where Johnny and Mahala were living, sees this beautiful young maiden heading down towards the water spout, and he goes up to Johnny and presents him the mirror. And Johnny says, oh, wonderful to have you here. Did you see Mahala? And he says, no. Where is she? Well, you had to meet her. She was going down to get water. And he says, that was Mahala? I don't understand. And Johnny explained to him this. He says, I wanted an 8-cow wife, and so I paid 8 cows. Can you imagine what would have happened to Mahala if when she went to get water every day, she had to think that she was only worth 1 or 2 cows? But because she knew what her value was, and I've been criticized for telling this story because I don't think women have any cow value, you understand? But because she felt valued, because she felt special, because she felt important, what happened to her? Now, I have an 8-cow family, and I know you do, and I think this is the important part of that story for me. You know, there's nothing wrong with my wife shopping in the bargain basement or the thrift stores if she has a choice to do it. But what's wrong is when she thinks that that's the only place that she can do it. I wanted an 8-cow family. I wanted an 8-cow wife. I wanted, well, I think you get the idea. What is it that motivates people? People. Most of us are in this business because of families. Because we want our families to experience all there is, all they can experience. And that's how the people part can be a powerful motivator. And then the third motivator that Sterling Sill talks about, and this is the one I'll close on tonight. It seems like night in here, but it's really morning, isn't it? He says the third thing that motivates people is a cause. Now, I used to use that expression in Australia, and I think it's the same way here. They told me, they asked me, is that Holdens or Cadillacs? And then when I explained to them what I meant, they said, no, that's cause, as in apple cause. So it's the cause, okay? The mission, in other words, a sense of vision, a sense of being involved with something bigger than we are. It's a powerful, powerful motivator. And what I've discovered is that's probably the biggest reason that most of you are here, because you're motivated by the Nikken mission. The idea of helping people be all they can be, helping people experience real joy. One of the other things that I've experienced is this, that there's only one real way to experience joy, and that is in service to other people. The exciting thing, we were talking about the $250,000 check, the exciting thing about those dollars is every single one of them represented what? Service. Somebody's life who's been bettered and somebody's life who's been improved. But there's another part of this that I think is really, really important. See, it's not just about, Nikken is not just about helping people earn more money. It's a way of life. It's a way of becoming more in all 5 areas. One of the exciting things to me about that is, and I discovered this, some of you may be able to picture in your minds a big target. I was watching a little bit of television yesterday. They had the dart competition, throwing darts. You know what the target looks like, right? And right in the center is the bullseye. If you would imagine with me for just a minute this bullseye, right in the center, the bullseye of the target are your principles, your values, what you stand for, who you really are. That's the core. Then that in turn influences the second ring of the target, which are your attitudes and feelings, how you feel towards other people, what your attitudes are about life, your family, and the people around you. And that in turn then influences the outer circle, which is your behavior, your actions. Now think about it. There is your action, your attitude, and your values. When they are congruent, when you are acting on the outside, what you say you are in the inside, you have integrity. I want for you to imagine with me for a moment that you believe, for example, that being honest is really important, but you lied today. Your circle on the outside is no longer consistent with what you say you have on the inside. How well will you sleep tonight? If you know you're out of integrity, do you think you can experience real joy? Do you think you can experience peace of mind without integrity? Integrity comes from a word meaning wholeness, doesn't it? It means being whole. To me, this is the biggest, the most important part about Mr. Masuda's vision, is helping people come into integrity. Now, none of us are perfect in those areas, but to me, this is one of the missions of life. This gives, you know, the exciting thing to me about our industry is that every day we get to test our integrity from what time we say we're going to get up in the morning to our attitude towards introducing this to another human being, towards, as Patel said, the idea of not going home until you've talked to that other person. That's real integrity, and that's when we experience joy and peace of mind in our lives. Now, here's the other part of that, though. Give you an idea. This is where this focused, dedicated, and disciplined part comes in. Let's suppose, for example, that I've decided I'm gonna I'm going to grow me some strong muscles. And so I decided to do push-ups. Y'all know what a push-up is? And I've learned that you got to do 20, 25 push-ups to start doing any good. So I get down, and I haven't done them in years, so I get down and I do 2 or 3 push-ups. I found out it's more aggravation than I'd planned on. But I got plenty of money, so what I'll do is I'll just hire somebody to lift me up and down. Will I grow strong muscles? What is necessary for me to grow strong? Not just muscles, but in integrity. What does it take? You've heard the expression, opposition in all things. Resistance is necessary. There has to be opposition. And in fact, Khalil Gibran, in his book called The Prophet, made this statement. He says, the mountain of your joy, in other words, how much joy you can experience, will be determined by the valley of your sorrow. In my mind, that means how much opposition you've had is going to determine how much joy you have when you reach the mountaintop. So opposition is important. I didn't understand this as I was struggling in my network marketing business. I was really, my attitude was this. My paradigm was that successful people were those who had no problems. The reason I knew that was true because I felt like a failure and I had a lot of problems. And so I related success with no problems, failure with having problems. And then again, a beautiful cassette was loaned to me by Norman Vincent Peale. And that totally shifted my paradigm. Norman Vincent Peale, some of you may have read his book, Why Positive Thinkers Get Positive Results, or listened to his recording. And in that, I played that, it must have been 1,000 times. In fact, I played it so many times, I have it in my memory. And if I could just quote a few excerpts from it, maybe you can catch the idea I'm trying to get across here. Norman Vincent Peale said he was walking down the streets in New York City one day, and he ran across an old friend of his named George. And he says, I could tell from George's disconsolate demeanor that he wasn't exactly filled overflowing with the ecstasy of human existence. He says, that's just a high-class way of saying George was dragging bottom. He says, I asked George, how are you, George? And he says, that represented an enormous mistake on my part because George proceeded to tell me exactly how he was. And the more he talked, the worse I felt. He says, oh, it's these problems. I love the way Peale pronounces it. Problems. Problems. Nothing but problems. If you could just get me shed of these problems, I would love you for the rest of my life. He says, well, I'm always of an interest to help people. And so I said to George, George, I think I can help you. I was down in the Bronx the other day on professional business. And I ran across a guy down there, the head guy, who told me he was in charge of 600,000 people and not one of them had a problem. He says, the first excitement I saw in George's face suffused his countenance, and he said, lead me to that place. That's for me. He says, okay, you asked for it. It's the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. And he says, it's a fact. There's 600,000 people down there, and not one of them has a problem. But they are dead. He says, I think it follows in logical sequence that the more alive you are, the more problems you have. The person who has 10 good-sized problems is twice as alive as a poor apathetic fool who only has 5 problems. And those of you who have no problems, I warn you, you're on the way out and don't know it. He says, what I would recommend to you as soon as this meeting is over, you run to your home and run into your bedroom and kneel down by the bed and pray to the Lord and say to the Lord, Lord, what's the matter? Don't you trust me anymore? Give me some problems. I love that story. Now, what that did for me is it totally changed my paradigm. It totally changed my point of view about the value of problems. And I started to see them, and in fact, what I tried to eliminate was the word problem. It was what? Opportunity for growth. One of my mentors in this industry said years ago, he says, a person is only as big as the problems he can solve. Therefore, every day, I look for bigger problems. Now, I'm not there yet. I knew he was crazy. But isn't it a fact, if we see them as opportunities to grow, if we see them as an opportunity to become more of who we are, and if we see them as an opportunity to serve other people, if we can discover what are the problems that other people have, the more alive we are, the more we can serve them, and the more we can help in their growth. And in this business, what happens? The way to get what you want is do what? Help other people get what they want. That's what this whole industry is about. That to me is so exciting. I've discovered some things that make that happen. You know, it's really easy to be positive and motivated and up when you're around people like you, because you're positive and motivated and up. But what happens when you go out into the real world? The whole world isn't like you, is it? The whole world isn't positive and up and excited and motivated. In fact, when you try to talk to them about magnets, what do they tell you? You got to be crazy. When you try to talk to them about multi-level marketing or network marketing, what do they tell you? Oh, that's a scam, all these kind of things. In other words, they try to rain on your parade, and that's easy here in London. Did you notice? You got to have an umbrella. What's that umbrella? It's your own attitude. At all costs, you've got to protect your own attitude. You've got to figure out ways of remaining up and positive and motivated. And one of the things that I've done over the years that has helped me tremendously, I surround myself with cassette recordings. When I'm in the automobile, instead of listening to the radio, if I can just plug in an Earl Nightingale or a Dennis Waitley or Brian Tracy or any of these, there's so many good tapes out there. Anything that will help you stay up. I surround myself with positive, good books, not just novels. In fact, I don't read many novels, but I read all I can on autobiographies. People who have done it. Winston Churchill and you know, he's been an inspiration to me for many years. His famous saying about how does he say it in English? Never, 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 never give up. What an inspiration that is. Because things are not always easy. You have challenges. You have those times that you want to quit. One of the things that I got that's helped me was a thing on persistence. If I could just share it with you. And it says this: nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education alone will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. That's what I learned in my experience in network marketing. You know, there were other people who were smarter, there were other people who were better speakers, there were other people who were better, all kinds of people who, if I compared myself to them, they had a lot more than what I had. But here's what they didn't have over me. Maybe they were equal, but they could never out-persist me. Some people call it stubbornness. In my case, it was persistence. You know, if it's your kids, it's bullheadedness. If it's my kids, it's determination. You know, that kind of thing. It's a point of view, isn't it? But being persistent, when you know what the dream is, when you know what the goal is, can overcome all obstacles. By the way, I like this other expression. Sometimes you have to do some other things to lighten it up. It says, with all that there is to be accomplished during the months ahead, it would be appreciated if those who are saying it can't be done would stay out of the way and not distract those who are doing it. I like that. Sometimes you have to remind yourself, whose side are you on anyway, right? Well, if I could share with you one other little personal experience with this idea of persistence. Over the years, I've done a lot of seminars and like to feel like I've helped some people discover some of these principles. And in one of the classes, there was a lady who shared a poem with me. She'd gone through some terrible times, some abuse in her childhood, some abusive marriages, and like the world had really come down on her, and she was coming through it. And she gave me this poem, if I could read it to you. She says, I feel like a butterfly trying to emerge from the cocoon. If someone helps me, I'll die. I will make it. It's taking all of my strength. But wait until you see how strong and beautiful I'll be. Shed no tears for me. I'm sorry for you who have no cocoons, or those who die while still in the shell, or worse yet, those who get too much help and are crippled and never learn to fly. You'll never know what one little, well, maybe it's as little as a smile, or maybe it's a hug, or maybe it's sharing something like this with someone that will totally change their life. You know, the fascinating thing about this, I had an experience, if I could just be a little personal, I've lost track of my time. Have I got 5 more minutes? I don't have the time up there. It's been 2 months ago, I had a son return from spending 2 years on a mission for his church, and it was in the country of Taiwan, and it was not easy for him. And he experienced maybe just touching the lives of just very few people. I'd had a similar experience 40 years ago in Peru, and I shared with him an experience that had just happened to me in December. I was reading an article in that church's magazine, and it was one of those articles where it's talking about pioneers in Peru, you know, pioneers of this church in Peru. And the first person it named was a person by the name of Roberto Vidal. And I was thrilled when I saw that. It talked about how he had influenced the growth in Peru more than any other person, and how he'd become such a leader and so forth. He was the first person that my companion, we always went 2 by 2, kind of like an ABC. You know what ABCs are, right? We'd gone by 2 by 2, and it was the first person that my companion and I had met when I arrived in Peru. Now, here was my point. My point to my son was this: do you think that when we met him, we knew what he would be doing 40 years later? Of course not. We had no idea. We had no idea the size of the heart, the spirit that was inside that man. And my point to my son was, he doesn't know that either about the lives that he touched. If he only touched one life, what could happen 40 years later? Now, here's my point with you. You see, you don't know when you leave here today, but what the very next person you meet will be another Isamu Masuda. I know when Mr. Masuda first got involved in network marketing those years ago, 25 years ago, that those people who knew him had no idea how he would influence the world. I know you didn't know it, and he has influenced your life, hasn't he? Do you know how I know that he has had influence in your life? Because you're here. You wouldn't even be here if somebody 25 years ago hadn't introduced Mr. Masuda to this whole marvelous experience of network marketing. Think about the power of one individual, what you can really do. But what does it take? It takes a commitment. It takes some determination. Let me just share with you another one of these little things that I've accumulated over the years about commitment. It says commitment is what transforms a promise into reality. It is the words that speak boldly of your intentions, and the actions which speak louder than the words. It is the making the time when there is none. None of you have a problem with time, right? It's coming through time after time after time after time, year after year after year after year. Commitment is the stuff character is made of. The power to change the face of things and change the world. It is the daily triumph of integrity over skepticism. Does that apply to you? The daily triumph of integrity over skepticism. Commitment reaches out to others. enrolling them in your dreams and your vision. It creates the possibility of an inspired partnership with exceptional results sure to follow. That's what commitment's about. Can you transform the world? Well, you bet you can. Ralph Waldo Emerson. It is one of the most beautiful compensations of this life that no one can sincerely try to help another without helping themselves. As you serve, as you help others, you are transformed. You become more and more. Now what happens is there's a lot of us who don't think that we can make a difference. Our conditioning teaches us that maybe we can't do it, when in reality all we have to do is dream. All we have to do is understand that we can be more, and that basically everyone would like to be more tomorrow than they are today. Wouldn't we all like to be better human beings tomorrow than we are today? You've heard the expression, green things grow and ripe things rot. If we're not growing, we're rotting. We get a chance to be more of who we are. One of my favorite poems of all time is a poem by Rudyard Kipling. I know you're all familiar with it, and I won't take the time to do it, but if, and in that poem he talks about filling the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds of long-distance run. Having the will to hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says, hold on. I think that comes from that commitment. That's what I think Sill meant when he talked about that dedication to a cause and being able to dream. Help. In my mind, you're not Nikken distributors. You are dream builders, dream igniters, if you will. Build your dreams so big that other people get excited by your dreams and start to get turned on about their own dreams. Earl Nightingale said this. He says, successful people are dreamers who have found a dream too exciting, too important to remain in the realm of fantasy, and who day by day, hour by hour, toil in the service of their dreams until they can touch it with their hands and see it with their eyes. Let me just close with a story that has had tremendous significance for me in the last few years. Story is, how many of you have been to the beach? And most of you, have you been to the beach? There are beaches in England too, I know that, right? This day, a little boy goes to the beach, and the tide had gone out and stranded just thousands and thousands of starfish. Y'all know what a starfish is? You know, looks like that, the starfish. And the little boy is out there trying to save these starfish, and one by one he's picking them up and throwing them back in the water, one by one, trying to save the lives of these starfish. And an old man is up on the cliff watching this, and he says to himself, what a ridiculous thing. There's millions of those starfish out there. How in the world can that little kid think he's making a difference? So he took it upon himself as the messenger of truth to go down to the beach and tell this little kid, he says, son, there's thousands and millions of these things out. You're not going to make a difference by doing what you're doing. And as the little kid picked up this next starfish, he said, I'm making a difference in the life of this one. You too can make a difference. The power of one is this is the thing that I've learned from this industry. You have no idea of the potential you have to affect this world for good. By just, who is the starfish out there that's waiting for you? You may only touch the life of one person in your whole experience, in this Nikken experience. But that life could be another Isuma Masuda. Good luck to you. Make a difference. You are at the right time, at the right place, with the right company, and you too can make a difference in the lives of others. Thanks so much for being here.